welcome to the show. Today I have the pleasure of being joined by Matavao. Al, welcome to the show.
Thank you, brother. Thanks for having me.
So great to have you on the show. We are talking to you right now and you're in Alaska. So it's the first time I've ever spoken to somebody in Alaska. How's it going up there?
It's starting to get chilly. It's starting to get chilly. Summer is fading away.
Is it? And what's the temperature outside right now?
I think it's around 55 or
Okay.
yeah, 50.
Yeah, I'm in Pennsylvania. We're still in the 70s at night and the 80s during the day. So things are pretty good here. This is just an Alaska question. You're the first person I've ever interviewed from Alaska, or living in Alaska. You're not from Alaska, but living in Alaska. What's it like when it's all dark and all light? And do you get that where you live there?
Yes. So during the winter time, we have probably at least 3 to 4 hours of daylight, and then summertime it's just all daylight, pretty much. It's not really dark. It's just no dark. You can still walk out at midnight, and you can still see the blue skies. Excuse me.
Okay. And for you as a fighter and a professional athlete, which one is better for you? Do you like it being dark more or light more as far as training and energy and those type of things?
I'd rather do the lighting because especially summertime, we have the sun, and it's kind of nice to have that heat going, around the gym or training, so you can get some sweat in. But in the wintertime, it's really hard to break a sweat. You got to warm up for at least an hour and a half just to break a sweat, just to get warmed up.
Now, speaking of that and related to training, is that something that you think is good? I mean, you're warming up for an hour and a half to break a sweat. Do you think that kind of adds to your training regimen in the wintertime?
Yes, it does. It helps a lot though with getting my body warmed up because especially I hate training in the wintertime because it's always cold, man, and it's hard to at least try to warm up your feet because when you step on a mat, the mat is always cold.
Okay. I've never heard anybody talk about warming up their feet before, so I guess that's an Alaska training must, So
Yeah.
we're going to get back to you being in Alaska, but I know you were born and raised in American Samoa, and you're Samoan. So talk about that. What was it like being raised there? And I'm assuming it's a lot warmer in American Samoa than it is in Alaska. So what was the upbringing like in there for you?
Man, the weather the weather is nice. It's kind of like Pennsylvania.
Okay.
We're up in the 80s and the 90s every day, all day, but it's humid, so it kind of gives you a little kick to it. But growing up in Samoa it's really good because I've grown to be more respectful to where my parents have taught me. It's all about family and respect, and that's pretty much what I've grown up to be.
Well, that's incredible. Just as a person, I bring this up a lot on this show because we interview a lot of fighters on their way to the UFC and after the UFC. And obviously, I think respect is a character to just have as a person. Who cares if you're a fighter or any other profession? Respect and love for your family is obviously values that will last you a lifetime and not just a fighting career. So that's hats off to your parents. Obviously, at some point you moved to Alaska. I know your first pro fight was in Alaska, and that was in 2015. So what took you to Alaska, and kind of what's that journey been like going to Alaska and being in Alaska now the last 5 years?
It's been a crazy journey, man. I moved up here because the economy back in American Samoa wasn't spiking up or doing any good. So my brother was already in Alaska, so he moved me up here just to help my parents out financially. So it was my main focus when I moved up here, get a job, help my family back in Samoa, and it was me and my brother just doing both of those things just to help out my family in Samoa. So then move up, my older brother moved up, and he went to the state. He moved up to the capital of Alaska, so he moved to Juneau. But the journey has been crazy, man. Like I moved up here, and I had to get used to the American culture.
Mm.
And that was the one main thing that I was having a little bit of a problem with, is try to settle in with American culture. It was kind of hard to the transition from the island to up here.
Sure, from the island stuff there. I guess one big thing is you were moving in with your brother, so that's nice that you're able to connect with family and have that bond, which is obviously much better than moving up. And it sounds like he really helped you out by having you come, but he was already in Alaska without the family support. So hats off to him, obviously. So you mentioned work-wise. What work did you first get in Alaska, and are you still bivocational doing fighting and a job on the side, or how do you do that?
So my first job up here in Alaska, I work at Chuck E. Cheese.
Okay.
And, and when I moved up here, I didn't really know MMA that much. You know, I've been just, my main focus was my family, and then I saw an event on TV that they're doing boxing, and I was interested, and I was trying to do boxing. My brother's like, "Hey man, don't do that. You're not used to up here in Alaska yet, so I don't want you to do anything stupid. Don't go out. It's dangerous up here in Alaska." So and then I kept switching jobs, and I worked for the Coca-Cola Bottling of Alaska, and that's where I kind of start doing food job, full time, 40-hour a week, and train every day. So and then I switched jobs, so I'm still working full-time job and full-time training.
Sure, absolutely. And you had mentioned that in American Samoa, you didn't really have exposure to MMA or anything. So you started learning about boxing. So when did you transition to MMA, or did you just get to a gym that did all MMA? Or how did you find MMA from being interested in boxing?
So my fiance, actually the one who got me into MMA, because at the boxing event I was fighting, she was sitting at a side ring. This is before we met, and then the next morning I went to work, and I didn't know she was working for the same company. So and then we met. She like introduced me to. She's like, "Hey, I do Muay Thai, and I want you to come try it." I was like, "Sure, why not?" So I've never kicked before in my life. I've never done kickboxing or throw any kind of kicks. So she picked me up. We went to her Muay Thai class, and she introduced me to the instructor, and the instructor was like, "Hey man, you got really powerful kicks. You should keep coming." I was like, "Sure." But then that's how I became to love MMA, because my coach was like, the instructor was like, "Hey man, you should come to MMA. I think you should try it out. It'll be fun." So then a couple weeks, I told him that I gotta try this first because I'm not used to Muay Thai yet. I gotta try this first. So in the next couple weeks, I joined the MMA team, and that's where it all started.
And that process, going from a background that didn't have a martial arts background, it sounds like, and you kind of built it all since you moved to Alaska, which hats off to you, putting all that work in. But once you were transitioning into MMA, what clicked with you the best, and what has been the most, I guess, challenging to learn?
The most challenging thing that happened, and how my career took a turn, it's when Dana White was in the tour, on a tour, I think 2015 or 2016, and he came to Alaska, and my cousin was like, "Hey, Dana White is going to be in town. Are you going to be fighting on this card?" I was like, "No, but let me ask my coach to put me on this card." So then I asked my coach, like, "Hey, put me on this Dana White card. He's going to be in town." So I fought on that card, and I lost. And that was a turning point in my career, knowing that the big boss was there, and I wasn't impressing him the way I wanted to be. I wanted to impress him. So that was a big lesson learned for me. And I took MMA serious after that, because I was only just doing it for the money, just to show people, oh, I can punch somebody in the face. I know I can fight. But then after that fight, I lost. I was like, man, I got to take this serious. So from that point on, things went good from there.
Well, and pointing this out, you know this, but so our audience knows, you have an 8-2 pro record. So to say you lost, that's only one of the two losses you've ever had. And you've been on a tear since that fight, which has been incredible. You've gotten a lot of knockout wins. In fact, your most recent fight was right before COVID. Talk to me a little bit about that. According to what I could find on you, you fought in Alaska pretty much, over and over and over again, and then you built up a pretty good record. And then your last 2 fights have been in Hawaii. So you're actually ranked first. Tapology has you #1 in middleweight and light heavyweight in Hawaii, as well as Alaska. So how'd you get to Hawaii? Kind of what led for you taking 2 fights in Hawaii?
So before the fight in Hawaii, I was looking for a manager at this point. I didn't have a manager, but then my coach was trying to get fights all over the world, like LFA, anywhere, like in Florida, like in Seattle, in California. So he was just like sending all these promotions my name. So, and then Hawaii got my name first, and then they offered me a fight, and then they offered me the title fight, and I was like, why not? Let's do it. So then we took the fight to Hawaii, but after that fight, I talked to a manager, and he said, hey, let's get one more fight before we talk. So then the second fight came up, and then it came pretty short. It was fun. It was a knockout, but it was also on my birthday, so it was a gift for me. But I wanted to show people what I can do.
Well, that was a 16-second knockout. So happy birthday to yourself.
Yeah.
And also, your birthday was therefore in February, just before the start of COVID. So here you are in Hawaii. Did you get some time down in Hawaii afterwards for your birthday and to enjoy because there's a lot of Samoa culture in Hawaii
Yes.
too. Did you get to check out and kind of enjoy that part of Hawaii before you went back to Alaska?
Not really. I didn't get to enjoy a lot because of work. I was only able to get a little bit of time off. So like after the fight, I had to like fly back right away.
Sure.
And then I took just at least 1 day off from work just to recover, even though it was only 16 seconds, but just to enjoy a little bit. But yeah, usually I'm always constantly at work, or like when I get a fight, I'm only taking a little bit amount of time off from work. So I wasn't able to spend a little bit of time in Hawaii like I wanted to.
Well, sure. I mean, that does make sense given your focus on work. And I actually trying to remember who I had a podcast guest on a little bit ago who was bivocational, doing very well in his fighting career, but he felt like everything he does in his job to be dedicated and a good worker is making him a better fighter, because he can't just, in his words, he can't just lay around and wait for practice. Pro fighters,
right,
they kind of take breaks, which is good. It's a good thing that pro fighters, but the full-time fighters that's all they're doing. And he thinks it's a mental edge to constantly be having to work and then do fighting. Do you like that mental edge as far as what you've been doing? You've been 10 fights into your pro career working full-time. So how is that for you mentally?
I separate my work from training, and I think that kind of helped me a lot mentally, because right when I clock off, I leave everything off my head from work. So I just go right into training, and I kind of enjoy doing that because I have 2 different, like sometimes I'll be at work and I'll be like thinking about fighting, and then I was like, I gotta stop doing this because this is not part of what I'm doing. So I gotta keep my focus work to work and fight to fight. So that's kind of the way I do it.
That also makes a lot of sense mentally. I think some fighters, probably the most famous fighter to ever talk about the mental strain was GSP. He actually talked about going to counseling, and because of course, he was talking about being the champ and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He brought up the fact that every single second he was awake, he was thinking about fighting and not losing and having to win. And so like there is something healthy about putting your mind, obviously you're engaged, putting your mind on your fiance, putting your mind on your family, putting your mind on your work. That makes fighting more exciting than pressure, which is good.
Yes. Yes.
I just mentioned the word pressure. So I want to jump back to your very first pro fight. You fought a guy who had 10 wins and 14 losses. So he had 24 pro fights, and that's your debut fight. So incredible that you took on a guy with 24 pro fights. how much amateur experience had you had before you're pro, and what made you take a guy? Yes, he had a bunch of losses, but still 10 pro wins, 24 pro fights total. That's an insane number of experienced fights. So what made you take that fight, and how much preparation had you done as far as amateur? Because I couldn't find any amateur record for you, but maybe you had them and they just weren't reported. I don't know.
Yeah, so I had two amateur fight, and so before I start fighting pro, I wanted to test myself. I didn't tell my coach or my teammates about this. I just went and did my own amateur fight on my own, and I won both of them, and it was fun. So like after my second amateur fight, and I came to the gym the next day, and I told my coach, "Hey, I want to fight. I want to get into pro." He was like, "Oh, really? Well, let's get you an amateur fight first." And I was like, "I already got that covered. I did some like the last 2 weeks. It was like every week this promotion does amateur fight. So I just hop onto it 2 weeks in a row, and I told him about it, and then he was like, "Oh, really?" So then we sat down, and he watched all of the videos. I'm like, "Okay, all right. So let me give your name to the promoter." So he sent my name out to the promoter, and that was the name that was given to us. And I was like, "Yeah, I've seen that guy fight so many times, and yeah, I'll take him." So back then, the mentality that I have, I didn't really care who I would fight at any point, because I just wanted to make a name for myself. Like, yeah, I'm a fighter. I'm gonna go do this. But then becoming more mature in fighting makes me change my mindset about fighting. So, but I didn't have a lot of preparation leading up to my pro fight. But with the help of my coach, because on my first pro fight, on that fight, I cut at least 55 pounds to get down to 205. Mm-hmm. I was walking around 265 at the point when my coach was like, "Hey, they say yes. How much you weigh?" I was like, 265. I was like, "Well, this is a 205 fight. You gotta go down now." I was like, "Shit." So it took me a month to cut 55 pounds, but it was not bad.
Wow. Well, two things I want to talk about. One is, what was it like to have that mental transition between just fighting, like you said, to make money, to be a pro fighter? You weren't really thinking of your career until after Dana White came. So what was that transition? What was that mental transition like?
It was hard, man, because being not really care about the life that you're risking in there really sucked. But now I had to think outside of the box, not just for myself that I'm risking, is that the life of my family. If I'm injured, I'll be out of work and I won't be get paid. So like I'm putting a lot of people at risk at this point. So I had to change that mentality real quick, because it wasn't helping me at all. Going in there and just try to brawl, just try to win fights and stuff like that. So I had to be smart about it. So it was really hard to try to change that mentality.
Sure. I mean, that makes sense. And that's one of the things that's as much of a weapon as your physical weapons. Right. Muay Thai is called the art of 8 limbs, right? 8 weapons: the knees, the elbows, the feet, and the hands. So in a way, you got to add mentality in there,
right.
Being mentally healthy. And obviously that's a journey that we're all on, whether we fight or not. We're all on the mental fight and the mental balance, which is good. Jumping back to your first fight, you cut all that weight. You have fought at both light heavyweight and middleweight. And, you're ranked both. Tapology has you ranked both. And your fight just a couple days away now is at 205. And so talk about weight. What weight do you prefer? Do you really care, or do you kind of see your career going in one weight or the other? Or are you still waiting to see what happens in the UFC?
I think after this fight, I would say it will be my last fight at 205. Me and my coaches have talked about this so many times, but it's always been the only offer that's given to me is 205s. So I can never turn down this kind of opportunity, especially this one. because when this opportunity came up, I asked for 85. It's like, well, is there an 85er? And then, nothing was given to me. So I was like, well, I'll just take the 205 then. But for the future reference, I wanted at least go down to 85, do one more fight at 85, and then probably drop down to 70.
Now, I saw that your height was listed as 5'8". Is that the main reason why you're targeting 170 in the future? Because of what happens in the UFC, you kind of can see what height works at what weight?
Yes, that would be a disadvantage for me.
Mhm.
It's my height, because especially I was just watching the fight before the co-main event, the welterweight bout,
Yeah.
and those guys are huge. And from just comparing it to me, if I ever be in that position, it would be bad for me because I have the height disadvantage.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also incredible that here you are, a professional athlete. You've obviously got your nutrition under control because you used to be in the 260s range. And now
Yeah.
here you are fighting at 205, planning on 185, and eventually planning on 70. So you're going to be, I don't know if this name means anything to you, Joe Riggs. Joe Riggs has fought at heavyweight and then ended up
Yes.
playing UFC at 170. So
Yeah.
he was kind of on that journey um,
Mm-hmm.
as well. So that's incredible. You are the main event, or I guess they sometimes call it the featured bout for Dana White
Mm-hmm.
Contender Series. How did that come about? Do you care? Do you not care? What's it like to kind of be in that position?
I didn't really care. I prefer, being, fight in, the beginning of the card, just to get out of the way. Because me is sometimes the waiting game is kind of hard for my mental game. Sometimes I just don't like just waiting. So like I just like to get it out of the way as fast as I can. So, but in this position, when they bumped me up to main event, to feature bout, I was kind of happy. I was like, okay, since now we're in the feature bout, now they have a lot of focus on the two guys at the end of the card. So it's I'm liking it.
Sure. And speaking of that, I recently had the Cosi Brothers on. I don't know if you've been following the Dana White. I
Yes,
had them both on. Hats off to them. They just did an incredible job. Both got first
they did an
ever.
amazing job.
Incredible job. But Lewis was the main event, and I saw that in the lead up they did a lot of filming with him and not filming with Orion because they put more
Hmm.
focus on the featured bout. So have they been filming you, or do you think that's going to happen promo wise once you get to Vegas?
Matter of fact, I am in Vegas now as we
Okay.
speak. I just got in today, but I've already I've already done my promo productions earlier, a couple months back. So I haven't seen any promo came out yet, so I don't know. I
So
want to watch it.
so promo wise, they sent a film crew up to Alaska for promo.
No, they send me out here. I
They,
I, I
they
flew up
brought
here.
you out and then
Yeah,
back. Okay, gotcha.
yeah.
And I can no longer be excited because I'm not interviewing you in Alaska. So there goes my excitement is out the window. No, it's so great talking to you. We'll have to do an interview after the fight once you're back in Alaska, so I can say I interviewed from Alaska. We'll have to do that
Okay,
once you
sounds good.
win, once you're back. But talk about your birthday. There you are. You get a quick knockout, 16-second knockout, and then COVID hits. So February becomes March. COVID hits. Were you planning on fighting earlier? Obviously it's been 8 months. What was it
Hmm.
like? And then flying to Vegas during COVID to do your promos. How's all that been going?
Yeah, so after that fight, I know I wasn't injured, but I wanted to get back in right away. Like, another promotion in Hawaii had their card like in 3 weeks, and one of my teammates was on it, and I couldn't get the time off from work, but I wanted to hop on that card too, just to get another one in. But then right after that card on March, COVID hit, but I already got the call for the contender series for July before it was pushed back. So then COVID hit, and then from there I was just trying to maintain training as much as I can, but mentally it was kind of hard to train alone. You know, my fiance helped me a lot during doing a home workout. So she was part of the success of the COVID part. But other than that, like mentally, I hate training alone. I like to be in contact with my teammates. I like to do sparring. I like to roll. I like to wrestle, and I like to do all this kind of stuff with my teammate. But it was kind of hard with the COVID hit, and it was a mentally drain for me to try to maintain training physically.
Sure. I mean, that makes sense. That's a common theme among the COVID months. When did you know that it was going to be September 8th? And how long have you been back training with your teammates?
So I believe it was June, the beginning of June. It's when it was pushed back. But before May, I was already in camp at May. I started my camp in May, and then when my manager told me that it was pushed back to the 8th, it was kind of sad at the same time because I just wanted to get out of the way. But it was also good. It was kind of giving me more time to prepare and train more for this fight.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the balance. Obviously, you're the type of guy that
Yeah.
wants to fight, get out of the way, get moving. But at the same time, with all that was going on with COVID, it's incredible. The Dana White Contender Series, I think each year it's been great, but this year it's probably been the best. The talent level is incredible. And Dana just announced, I think it was news, because the week we just had, he talked about bringing fighters back in November. They're going to do
Yes.
another season in November. Obviously, you've been following the Dana White Contender Series. What have you been learning as a fighter that you can use specifically going into this Dana White Contender Series? Because it's a different environment. It's unique. What have you been learning? Because you're week 6, so there's been 5 weeks this season. What have you learned from watching the first 5 weeks?
I just learned that I got to put on a good show for Dana White. That's the main focus right now, is to put on a good show, because the last time I was in front of Dana White, that was not a good show. So this time I'm going to prove that I'm here to put on a good show for him, because that's what he wants.
Well, that's going to be an incredible experience for you to be able to redeem your first time before Dana and now your second time. We've also seen on the Dana White Contender Series that he hasn't been giving contracts to anybody that's been doing decisions. It's been finish onlys. But there's times that when somebody has a really good decision, he is willing to bring them back, later. And so you do have a lot of opportunities, which is good. I think he's doing a great job. He's actually bringing back Nate Smith, who actually lost to a fighter we'd interviewed. We'd interviewed the Brick Flick, who had a great, set the record for number of submission attempts, and he should be getting back on the show here soon once things calm down in his life. But it's great to see sometimes that Dana's willing to bring people back around. So obviously you want to get some type of good performance. Here, you mentioned talking about wrestling and rolling. You're more or less a knockout type guy. Do you feel like you like the wrestling and grappling and you'd want to get at some point a little bit more into the submission stuff, or is it just depends on what happens?
Yeah, it really depends on what happened. I have a really good wrestling game and my ground game, but if it goes to the ground, I would love to go to the ground, man. But if it's standing, then it would be bad for somebody to stand in front of me, because I have really good stand up. So I prefer stand up, but wrestling, I love wrestling.
Now, you just said it would be bad for somebody to stand in front of you, which is a great quote and very true, given your experience. You have an opponent. What do you know about him? What are you? You don't have to tell me all your game plan, of course, but what do you know about him? Do you do game planning? Does your coaches do the scouting? He's 3-0. He's undefeated. Clearly, at 3-0, he's made some impressive waves, because most people 3-0 aren't fighting in front of Dana on the Contender Series. So what do you kind of know about him, and what has it been like training for a guy that's obviously getting his shot as well?
The only thing I know about this guy, man, he's such a really nice guy. Like, I've watched your guys' interview, he's such a really nice guy, well-spoken guy. I got a lot of respect for him as a fighter and as a human being. There's no other reason for you to be, you know what I mean? So my coaches, yes, they do a lot of research on all my opponent, and we sit down, we go on a game plan and stuff like that. So, and we work on those game plan week after week after week, in the gym. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Well, and that's a great mindset to have. Obviously, I think we should be past 25 plus years. I think more and more people are bringing up the fact that fighting is about respect. It's about business. It's about an opportunity. You're a competitor. You're an athlete. We still have obviously some people that make it unnecessarily vulgar or personal. What's it like headed into the UFC, kind of knowing that you get your win, you get your shot, you're in the UFC. What's it like knowing that there might be times where other opponents make everything personal? Have you thought about how you'd respond? I mean, this is down the road, but some people, that's their life. I'm thinking probably shouldn't, but I'm thinking of certain people that's all they do. Platinum Mike Perry is famous for that. Other guys. So what's it like knowing you're going to be around some guys that's their shtick, whether it's true or not, that's their mindset that they project to the media. So how would you respond to something like that?
My emotion will show in the fight. So as you can talk shit to me all you want. Just don't bring my family in there, because my family didn't do anything to you. So if you're gonna bring my family into this business, then it'll be a problem. So in a fight, I will destroy you because you're talking shit about my family.
It's another great quote. I'm just giving tons of great quotes today. Well, it is good. I think more and more the generation that's coming up is, hey, this is a professional sport. And it's actually in many ways, because of Dana, because of COVID, some other sports are coming back now, but for many months, 5-6 months, it was the only sport. And I think that's really helped with their time on, obviously, the UFC Island, as well as them using the Apex. The Apex Center has kind of shown that, like, MMA is exciting. ESPN's been covering it, obviously, not only on ESPN Plus, but also on ESPN. What's it been like? You're in Vegas. Have you had a chance to tour or train either in the Apex or in the Performance Institute?
No, I have not. And I don't think they'll give me an opportunity to do so, because they're only doing it it's only UFC fighters.
Okay.
Yeah. But soon I hope I'll get a chance to get in there and get some work in the PI.
Well, that does make sense. I know that the PI, it's still fairly new, and they've been building one. They're building one in China, which might have been slowed down now with Corona. But obviously that's a cool thing to know that, like, there is a difference right now. Dana White Contender Series, you're fighting for the UFC, obviously, but you're not a UFC contracted fighter yet. So, and I think that is what makes the Contender Series more exciting, is the fact that it actually matters.
Yes.
I think a drawback to the reality TV show, The Ultimate Fighter, is even if you crush everybody, they don't count on your record. They're called exhibition fights. It's kind of a mess. But I always ask Dana White Contender Series people this question: if you had a chance and a choice between going on the show for 8 weeks, the UFC Ultimate Fighter show, or doing the Contender Series, which one would you pick if you had a fair option of both?
Contender Series for sure.
And why would that be? What do you see as the advantage of doing Contender Series?
Because I would get to perform, and I would like to add those wins onto my record, because if you go into tough and just keep fighting, and one person at the end, like, hypothetically speaking, I lost at the last person, and all those wins leading up to it doesn't count. But even though Dana White keeps an eye on those things, but I would rather have those count in my record. Those wins.
Absolutely.
In my record.
I mean, I think that makes business sense. Speaking of business sense, the Ultimate Fighter, because it's a reality TV show, they don't get paid in the way that fighters get paid. They get paid, I guess, more from being on the show or something like that.
Yeah.
And also something that comes up over and over again is you're training with your own team, your own teammates, your own coaches. Yeah. And if you get into the UFC from the Ultimate Fighter, you then go back to coaches who haven't coached you in 4 or 5 fights or 3 fights or whatever. It can be very strange. So I really think the Ultimate Fighter show, while still out there, I think the Dana White Contender Series is really starting to show that it's more exciting. It's better for the fighters too. You mentioned your fiance obviously being super important to getting you into Muay Thai to begin with, and then helping you train. who are your main thank yous? Obviously, give another shout out to her, but as we look at the fact that as a fighter, you go into a cage by yourself, but you're also carrying your team and who's helped you and molded you. So talk about that.
You know, it's mostly my team, my family, my teammate. You know, like we talk, like you say, you know, my fiance is the most important one that I will thank for everything that she's done for me, and my teammate alone has put a lot of time on me. They giving more time after work for me just to prepare for this fight. You know, Micah Graff has been my number one supporter. Nico Novelli, Shannon McKenzie, Jesse Hall, and those are the guys that have been supporting me all along. And you know, especially my sponsors, man, Peter and Trina and Anchorage Home Care. Those are the few people that have constantly supported me and helping me just to prepare for this fight coming up.
Well, it's always great to recognize both physical support, like people that train with you, and something that people don't always know is there's a lot of amateur fighters or even fighters that might not have taken fights that make pros better. This sometimes comes up. You'll know that I've done way too much stalking of GSP because he's my favorite all-time fighter, but he actually mentioned a guy who's trained with him for years. He said the guy's name, it's a Frenchman name, but he's never fought. But GSP will give him credit as being one of his main sparring partners, and the guy has no fights. So sometimes what people don't realize is that your gym, the people that are sacrificing time, you know, after work to make you better, that's what they care about. They care about you.
Yep.
And another thing is sponsors. You know, a lot of people don't understand that at an amateur or pro level, particularly outside of the UFC, sponsors make a huge difference. And so
It does.
Talk a little bit about what it was like getting sponsors, not maybe specifics, but like, what was it like going from a pro that didn't have sponsors to a pro that had sponsors, and what's the difference that's made for your career?
So my gym, my academy, it kind of switched up to in location in Anchorage. So I used to live on the south side, so I would drive 45 minutes to the gym, and you know, I'll be training all the way till 9:30, 10 a.m. No, 10 p.m. and then I'll have to drive back home. So for another 45 minutes. So by the time I get home, I'll be pretty tired. So those long drives every day, it costs me a lot of gas money, you know, and especially going home and prepare my meals from Sunday night for the week for my lunch meals. So my sponsors, they have helped me a lot with those. You know, they supported me financially, and even, you know, they'll come to the gym and they'll do Muay Thai with me. You know, some of them, they'll meet up with me just to check up on me. You know, those are the little things that I really appreciate about my sponsors.
Well, you gave two really specific examples that a lot of people don't realize, that there's just logistical things that sponsors help with, stuff like meals, stuff like gas, training opportunities. So shout out to all the sponsors, particularly the sponsors that never make it to the point of sponsoring somebody in the UFC. You know, I'm based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania now. They have a bunch of great sponsors that just focus on local MMA, sponsoring local MMA. Obviously, Anchorage, they're sponsoring local Anchorage MMA. And Dana will occasionally admit that they need these other organizations that are never on the level of the UFC to make fighters that can then go to the UFC. And we've seen that over and over and over again. And so it's a beautiful thing. Let's get to predictions. Do you want to make a prediction? What do you want to say about the fight as we look to close up here? You're only a few days away, and talk about the weight cut, I guess, a little bit, because that's always a part of it. But here you are a couple days out. So what's predictions? How's the weight cut? And parting point to ponder, I guess.
Let's talk about the weight cut first.
Okay.
I just ate a bowl of rice and chicken. And when I walked in here, and then they wanted to weigh me, and I guess I'm good, you know. So I didn't really have to, like my weight is good to the point where I can cut to 85 for Tuesday.
Right.
So I'm good on weight. But my prediction, man, I'm just gonna go in there and have fun, man. That's pretty much what I like to do. I like to have fun. I like to move a lot. You know, it's pretty much my style. I consider myself, you know, that light heavyweight Frankie Edgar, or like the Samoan Frankie Edgar, because, you know, I move a lot. I do a lot of movement in all my fight. I haven't showcased any of those in some of my fight, because apparently the last fight lasts 16 seconds. But The fight before that, not really so much because it was ended in the first round. But the fight before that, I was showcased a little bit of my footwork and my head movement, you know. But yeah, I just want to go in there and have fun, man. Stefan is a really nice guy and he's a good guy, so it's gonna be a good fight.
Well, absolutely. What a great interview. Thanks so much for coming on. I wish you the best in your upcoming fight, and obviously great to learn more about you. We'd love to have you back on after you win and to talk about your fight and all those things. So thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. I really appreciate your time and thank you for having me on the show.